Picture this. After a long day, you slip into your cozy bed, your head sinking gently into a soft, fluffy pillow. Such a natural, obvious gesture. Now imagine that pillow replaced by a hard stone block, carved and polished, yet as unyielding as rock itself. Your first thought would probably be that it's a joke, some disguised torture. Yet, for over 3 millennia, the ancient Egyptians chose what seems to us like absolute discomfort. But before diving into these mysteries, let me ask a quick question. Where are you listening to this story tonight? Whether you're in your comfortable bedroom or out for a walk. If this exploration of ancient Egypt's sleeping secrets intrigues you, don't hesitate to subscribe. What I'm about to tell you challenges our most basic concepts of comfort. It reveals a world where sleeping wasn't simply closing your eyes and drifting into unconsciousness, but embarking on a complex spiritual journey filled with rituals, magic, and divine connections. A world where every night was a little death and every awakening a rebirth. While we consider sleep merely a biological need, the ancient Egyptians saw it as a mystical bridge to hidden dimensions of reality. Their nocturnal habits reveal a civilization that had developed a profound and complex understanding of this phenomenon we take for granted. Prepare to discover why powerful pharaohs slept with their heads resting on stone, how they communicated with their gods during sleep, and why their nights were punctuated by voluntary awakenings that seem inconceivable to us today. In the dusty collections of museums, worldwide hide objects that baffle unsuspecting visitors. These artifacts, about 20 centimeters tall, resemble small, abstract sculptures, a solid base, an elegant central pillar, and at the top, a curved, flared form. Guides present them as Egyptian pillows, invariably provoking perplexed looks and incredulous smiles. These enigmatic objects bear the name headrests, and their discovery in Egyptian tombs has revolutionized our understanding of ancient sleep. Contrary to what their Spartan appearance might suggest, they weren't the result of some form of collective masochism, but the fruit of sophisticated reflection on the art of sleeping. Tutankhamun's tomb offers us the most spectacular example of this Egyptian fascination with headrests. When Howard Carter entered the antechamber in 1922, he discovered not one, not two, but 8 different headrests, each testifying to exceptional craftsmanship and complex symbolism. This profusion reveals how central these objects were in the life and death of high-ranking Egyptians. One of these headrests, carved from the purest ivory, presents a composition of striking beauty. In the center, the figure of the god Shu, personification of air and the breath of life, delicately supports the curved support destined to welcome the royal head. His outstretched arms symbolize the space he maintains between sky and earth, making the pharaoh's sleep a cosmic act. On each side, 2 majestic lions look in opposite directions, eternal guardians watching over the sovereign's rest. Another headrest reveals a different but equally fascinating approach. Entirely carved from precious wood, it displays on its sides the grimacing faces of the god base, that dwarfish divinity with deliberately frightening features. Far from being repulsive, these masks constituted the best nocturnal protection. Base, with his grotesque dances and terrifying expressions, was tasked with chasing away all demons and malevolent spirits that might have disturbed the royal sleep. But the technical marvel perhaps lies in this headrest composed of two identical elements in turquoise faience, connected by a central joint covered in fine gold. On this golden band, engraved with millimetric precision, intertwined the ankh and was symbols, respectively, evoking eternal life and divine power. Every detail of this object testifies to exceptional artisanal mastery, but also to a conception of sleep as a sacred moment. The practical aspect of these headrests reveals surprising ingenuity. In Egypt's torrid climate, where nighttime temperatures often remain high, the hard, smooth surface of these supports allowed optimal air circulation around the head and neck. The chosen materials, alabaster, ivory, precious woods, or polished stone, maintained relative coolness even during the hottest nights. This climatic function was coupled with a crucial aesthetic concern. The Egyptians, both men and women, wore hairstyles of extraordinary complexity, true capillary works of art that could take hours to prepare. Elaborate wigs, sophisticated braids, precious ornaments. This entire hair edifice had to be preserved night after night. The headrest allowed these creations to remain intact, the head resting above the hairstyle without crushing it. But reducing these objects to their mere utilitarian function would miss their most fascinating dimension. For the ancient Egyptians, the headrest was charged with profound spiritual symbolism. The elevated position of the head evoked the daily rising of the sun, associated with the perpetual rebirth of Re, the solar god. Each awakening thus became a metaphor for resurrection. Each night a journey toward temporary death, followed by a triumphant return to life. This solar symbolism explains why these objects systematically accompanied the dead in their tombs. Far beyond simple funerary furniture, they constituted magical tools destined to facilitate passage to the afterlife. The head of the deceased, maintained in elevated position, was ready to welcome the divine light that would awaken it to its new eternal existence. The funerary texts, particularly the famous Book of the Dead, accord capital importance to these ritual headrests. Chapter 166 is entirely devoted to them, revealing complex incantations destined to activate their protective powers. These magical formulas transformed a simple object into a powerful talisman, capable of repelling the dangers of the afterlife and guiding the soul toward its eternal destiny. The fabrication of these headrests also reveals fascinating aspects of Egyptian society. Models destined for daily use were generally carved from local woods, sometimes covered with a linen cushion to soften contact. Luxury versions, reserved for the elite, employed the most precious materials: elephant ivory imported from Nubia, translucent alabaster from the quarries of Hatnaub, or Egyptian faience with shimmering colors. This material hierarchy reflected social distinctions, but all Egyptians, from the most modest to the most powerful, shared this headrest tradition. For beyond social status, these objects embodied a shared vision of sleep as a fundamental spiritual act under the relentless sun of ancient Egypt, where temperatures can exceed 45 degrees in the shade during the day. The search for nocturnal coolness represented a daily challenge. Unlike our modern societies equipped with air conditioning, the ancient Egyptians had developed ingenious techniques to combat the oppressive heat of summer nights. The most surprising of these methods has come down to us through testimonies of ancient travelers and artistic representations found in tombs. The Egyptians practiced what we today call the Egyptian method. They wrapped themselves in dampened linen fabrics to sleep during the most torrid nights. This technique of disconcerting simplicity relies on physical principles that the Egyptians intuitively mastered. When water evaporates, it absorbs surrounding heat, creating a natural cooling effect. By dampening their fine linen sheets, sleepers benefited from primitive but effective air conditioning. The progressive evaporation of moisture, maintaining a bearable body temperature. The choice of linen was not fortuitous. This fiber, massively cultivated in the Nile Valley, possesses exceptional properties for hot climates. Its naturally aerated structure favors air circulation, while its high absorption capacity allows retaining sufficient moisture without creating an unpleasant sensation of excessive dampness. Pictorial representations in noble tombs sometimes show servants specialized in preparing these cooling linens. Armed with large jars of perfumed water, they dampened fabrics according to precise techniques, ensuring optimal humidity levels for each season and each moment of the night. This practice was often accompanied by other nocturnal cooling strategies. Egyptian dwellings were designed to favor air circulation, with openings made in thick walls and oriented according to prevailing winds. Flat roofs sometimes served as sleeping spaces during the hottest nights, allowing inhabitants to benefit from nocturnal breezes. The water used to dampen linens was not chosen randomly. Egyptians favored Nile water, considered a source of life and purification. Wealthy families sometimes added refreshing plant essences, wild mint extracts, lotus essential oils, or aromatic plant infusions cultivated in their private gardens. This method reveals the remarkable adaptability of ancient Egyptians when faced with extreme climatic constraints in their environment. Rather than passively enduring heat, they had transformed water, a central element of their civilization, into a tool of domestic comfort. Seasonal variations also influenced the application of this technique. During the hottest months, corresponding to our summer, the use of damp linens was daily. But even during more temperate seasons, certain Egyptians maintained this habit, finding in it a way to improve their sleep quality and maintain their nocturnal well-being. This practice crossed social barriers with some adaptations. While the elite benefited from servants dedicated to preparing these cooling linens, popular classes had developed their own variants, using simpler techniques but based on the same principles. The effectiveness of this method was such that it maintained itself for millennia, surviving dynastic changes and cultural evolutions. Texts dating from different periods of Egyptian history refer to these practices, testifying to their deep roots in the country's domestic culture. What strikes us about this tradition is that it reveals an approach to sleep radically different from ours, where we seek isolation and separation from the external environment. Egyptians cultivated a form of harmony with their milieu, using natural elements as allies of their rest. This philosophy of sleep in communion with nature extended to other aspects of their nocturnal practices. Rather than fighting against their environment, they exploited its resources with remarkable intelligence, transforming constraints into opportunities for well-being. In the darkness of ancient Egyptian bedrooms, beds stood like true domestic monuments, unlike our modern bedding, placed directly on the floor or on discrete bases. Egyptian beds rose proudly several dozen centimeters high, transforming the act of sleeping into a daily ascension ritual. This elevation was not a simple aesthetic whim, but responded to multiple concerns, from the most pragmatic to the most spiritual. At the most down-to-earth level, this raising constituted effective protection against unwanted intrusions. Snakes, scorpions, rats, and other nocturnal creatures that populated homes of the era. By rising above the ground, sleepers escaped the crawling dangers of the terrestrial world. But this rational explanation is not sufficient to understand the importance accorded to these elevated beds. The true reason for their conception lies in complex Egyptian cosmology, where each element of daily life finds its place in a system of symbolic correspondences. The feet of these beds reveal by themselves all the richness of this symbolism. Sculpted from the most precious woods, they faithfully reproduced lion paws, the royal animal par excellence, symbol of power and protection. These feline paws were not simple decorative ornaments, but true mystical guardians, charged with watching over their owner's sleep with the vigilance and strength of the king of animals. Certain beds pushed this protective logic even further, integrating into their very structure the figures of tutelary divinities. Headboards were often adorned with representations of Base, that dwarfish god with voluntarily grotesque features, whose mission consisted of frightening and chasing away all malevolent spirits that might have approached the sleeper. His terrifying grimaces, his wild dances sculpted in wood, constituted a spiritual rampart against the dark forces of night. Other protective divinities found their place in this sacred architecture of sleep. Toret, the hippopotamus goddess, associated with fertility and protection of births, frequently adorned the beds of couples desirous of founding a family. Her benevolent presence was supposed to favor conception and protect newborns during their first fragile nights. The construction of these beds was true art, combining technical prowess and spiritual knowledge. The frame was generally assembled without a single metal nail, Egyptian artisans preferring to use fitting and binding techniques that guaranteed both solidity and mystical purity of the ensemble. The ropes or straps that supported the sleeper were woven according to precise patterns, some geometric, reproducing protection formulas, others figurative, evoking divine scenes. The materials used for these beds also followed a strict symbolic hierarchy. Ebony, dark and dense, wood imported at great expense from Nubia, was reserved for pharaohs and the highest dignitaries. Its deep color evoked the mysteries of night and the afterlife, while its rarity emphasized the exceptional status of its owner. For nobles of lower rank, local sycamore, light and resistant wood, constituted an honorable choice, often enhanced with ivory or precious metal inlays. These inlays were never purely decorative. Each motif, each symbol engraved in ivory or gold, responded to precise protective logic. The Ankh, symbol of eternal life, naturally found its place on these pieces of furniture, destined to welcome sleep, this daily little death. The Eye of Horus, protection talisman par excellence, watched over sleepers with its gold pupil inlaid in ebony. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these beds lies in their capacity to transform domestic space into a private temple. Around the main bed was organized entire liturgical furniture, low tables for nocturnal offerings, braziers for protective incense, wall niches sheltering statues of tutelary divinities. This sacralization of nocturnal space reveals a conception of sleep radically different from ours. For us, sleeping means temporarily withdrawing from the world, isolating ourselves in the intimacy of our rest. For Egyptians, night was on the contrary a moment of intensification of relations with the divine, a period when the soul, temporarily freed from bodily constraints, could travel toward spiritual dimensions. This philosophy explains why even the simplest beds of popular classes included protective elements. Unable to afford precious woods and gold inlays, Egyptian artisans and peasants carved simple but effective apotropaic motifs in local wood, painted sacred colors on their bed frames, suspended above their couch terracotta amulets representing their favorite protectors. The arrangement of these beds in domestic space followed precise rules inherited from funerary architecture. The head of the bed was systematically oriented toward the east, direction of solar rebirth, while the feet pointed west, toward the realm of the dead. This orientation transformed each night of sleep into a symbolic journey from death to resurrection, from darkness to light. When darkness enveloped the Nile Valley, ancient Egyptians never abandoned themselves to sleep without surrounding themselves with a true army of mystical protectors. Around their bed, on small tables arranged with meticulous care, was organized a spiritual arsenal of fascinating complexity, composed of amulets, statuettes, and ritual objects destined to repel the maleficent forces of night. The scarab occupied a place of honor in this protective device. This humble insect, observed tirelessly rolling its dung balls under the burning sun, had become in Egyptian eyes the perfect incarnation of the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Its metamorphosis, from underground larva to brilliant beetle emerging from the soil, powerfully evoked the resurrection promised to faithful deceased. The scarab amulets that watched over Egyptian sleep were not simple naturalistic reproductions. Every detail of their conception responded to precise magical logic. Carved in green steatite, they evoked the vegetal rebirth of spring. Sculpted in red carnelian, they invoked the vital power of blood and sun. Made in ultramarine lapis lazuli, they established a connection with celestial mysteries and the depths of the afterlife. The underside of these scarabs often revealed hieroglyphic inscriptions of remarkable precision. Some reproduced royal names, transforming the amulet into a direct channel toward pharaonic protection. Others engraved magical formulas from sacred texts, invocations to protective gods, or apotropaic symbols destined to repel nocturnal demons. But the scarab did not reign alone over this protective pantheon. Beside it watched other guardians, each specialized in a particular aspect of nocturnal protection. The Eye of Horus, or Wedget, constituted one of the most powerful talismans of this spiritual arsenal. This mystical eye, lost by the falcon god in his combat against Seth and miraculously restored by Thoth, symbolized the victory of light over darkness, order over chaos. Eye of Horus amulets came in a variety of materials and sizes, from tiny gold examples destined to be sewn into nightwear, to imposing enameled faience versions that adorned bedsides. Their stylized form, mixing human eye with falcon motifs, created an image of striking visual power, supposed to fascinate and paralyze malevolent spirits. The Jed pillar, symbol of Osiris and eternal stability, also found its place in these protective collections. This stylized column, evoking both the backbone of the god of the dead and the sacred tree under which he had found refuge, represented divine permanence in the face of terrestrial vicissitudes. Jed amulets, often made of gilded wood, were placed vertically near the head of the bed, creating a cosmic axis connecting the sleeper to celestial powers. The Ankh symbol of eternal life completed this fundamental protective trinity. This ansate cross, distinctive attribute of Egyptian gods, concentrated in its refined form all the promise of immortality that animated pharaonic civilization. Sleepers often kept small ankh amulets within reach, which they clutched during their sleep like longevity talismans. These protective objects were not arranged randomly around the bed. Their placement obeyed precise rules, inherited from millenary traditions and codified by priests specialized in occult sciences. Scarabs associated with the rising sun found their place on the eastern side of the bed. Lunar symbols linked to Thoth and nocturnal mysteries were installed toward the west. General protection amulets encircled the bed, creating an impassable magical circle. The fabrication of these amulets constituted in itself a complex ritual. Specialized artisans, initiated into the secrets of protective magic, worked according to sacred calendars, choosing the most propitious moments according to lunar and stellar cycles. Each stage of creation, from the choice of raw materials to final finishing, was accompanied by specific incantations destined to breathe protective power into the objects. The activation of these amulets often required the intervention of a qualified priest. These specialists of the sacred proceeded to consecration ceremonies, reciting formulas from the most secret books, fumigating objects with rare incenses, sprinkling them with sacred waters taken from the most venerated temples. This arsenal of nocturnal protection was not limited to small portable objects. The walls of bedrooms were often decorated with painted or sculpted motifs, reproducing the same protective symbolism. Friezes of scarabs marched around the room. Eyes of Horus watched from strategic corners. Representations of guardian gods stood sentinel at the cardinal points. Even the colors used in bedroom decoration followed magical logic. Blue, color of the celestial vault and divine protection, dominated wall paintings. Gold, metal of the gods and symbol of incorruptibility, highlighted the most important protective motifs. Red, color of life and vital force, punctuated the decorative ensemble with touches of energy. For the ancient Egyptians, the boundary between sleep and death was far thinner than we might imagine today. Each night, as consciousness faded and the body grew still, they believed the soul embarked upon a perilous journey through the realms of the divine, encountering gods, demons, and the spirits of the deceased in a complex spiritual voyage that would determine not only the quality of their rest, but their fate in the afterlife. This profound connection between sleep and death permeated every aspect of Egyptian nighttime rituals. The word they used for dream, RSWT, literally meant to be awake or to watch. A paradox that reveals their understanding that while the body slumbered, the soul achieved a heightened state of consciousness, becoming alert to spiritual realities invisible during waking hours. In this mystical framework, dreams were not mere random neural firing or psychological processing, but direct communications from the divine realm. The gods spoke through sleep, delivering prophecies, warnings, guidance, and revelations that could shape the course of entire dynasties. Pharaohs regularly consulted dream interpreters before making crucial decisions, understanding that their nocturnal visions might contain strategic intelligence from the realm of eternity. The most remarkable testament to this belief system survives in the form of dream interpretation papyri, ancient Egyptian texts that functioned as comprehensive guides to understanding the symbolic language of sleep. The most famous of these, the Chester Beatty Papyrus III, dating from the reign of Ramesses II, catalogs over 108 different dream scenarios and their meanings, creating what is perhaps humanity's oldest recorded system of dream analysis. These ancient dream dictionaries reveal a sophisticated understanding of symbolism that would impress modern psychoanalysts. The Egyptians recognized that dreams spoke in metaphors and required skilled interpretation. Seeing oneself making love with one's mother was interpreted as good fortune, that one's fellow citizens would rally around them. Observing a woman's intimate parts was considered ominous, warning of impending poverty and disgrace. But perhaps most fascinating is how these interpretations reflected deep cultural anxieties and aspirations. Dreams of eating particular foods, wearing certain clothing, or encountering specific animals all carried precise meanings that connected the dreamer to their social context, their relationship with the gods, and their prospects for the future. The dream world became a mirror of waking reality, but one that revealed hidden truths and future possibilities. The Egyptians developed elaborate techniques for inducing prophetic dreams, practices known as incubation. Specialized temples, particularly those dedicated to healing gods like Imhotep, maintained sacred chambers where visitors could spend the night in hope of receiving divine guidance. These temple sleep chambers were carefully purified and sanctified spaces, often decorated with protective symbols and images of benevolent deities. The process of dream incubation involved extensive preparation. Petitioners would undergo ritual purification, abstain from certain foods, make offerings to the temple gods, and recite specific prayers before entering the sacred sleeping chamber. They would lie upon special beds, often adorned with protective amulets and inscribed with magical texts, while priests burned incense and chanted invocations designed to attract beneficial spiritual beings. These temple dreams were considered particularly powerful because they occurred in spaces already charged with divine energy. The proximity to sacred statues, the presence of holy relics, and the accumulated power of countless prayers created an environment where the boundary between mortal and divine consciousness became permeable. Visitors might dream of the god Imhotep himself, prescribing specific remedies for their ailments, or receive visions showing them the path to solve pressing personal problems. The connection between sleep and spiritual travel extended beyond individual dreams to encompass broader theological concepts. During sleep, Egyptians believed the Ba, one of the soul's components, could separate from the physical body and journey to distant realms. This nocturnal wandering of the spirit was not random, but followed specific routes through the cosmic landscape described in funerary texts. The most perilous of these spiritual journeys occurred during the deepest hours of sleep, when the soul might find itself traveling alongside the sun god Re through the underworld night voyage. This nightly journey of the solar deity through the realm of the dead was fraught with dangers, serpentine demons, lakes of fire, and the eternal enemy, Apophis, the chaos serpent who sought to devour the sun and plunge creation into eternal darkness. Ordinary mortals who found their sleeping souls drawn into this cosmic drama required powerful protection to survive the experience. This explains the elaborate defensive measures surrounding Egyptian beds, the protective amulets, and the invocation of guardian deities. The sleeping person was not merely resting, but potentially participating in the fundamental struggle between order and chaos that determined the fate of the universe. Long before electric lighting transformed human sleep patterns, our ancestors lived according to rhythms that seem almost alien to modern experience. Historical research has revealed that for countless generations, people did not sleep through the night in a single unbroken period, but instead practiced what scholars term biphasic sleep, a pattern of slumber divided into two distinct segments, separated by a period of quiet wakefulness. The ancient Egyptians were among the cultures that embraced this natural rhythm, organizing their nights around what they called the first sleep and second sleep. This wasn't a dysfunction or sleep disorder, but a deliberate and beneficial practice that aligned human rest with the deeper rhythms of nature and spiritual life. During the hours between these two sleep periods, typically occurring around midnight, Egyptians engaged in activities that our modern sensibilities might find surprising. This was not a time of anxious insomnia or restless tossing, but a peaceful interlude devoted to contemplation, gentle tasks, and spiritual practices that enriched their connection to the divine realm. Families would gather quietly around low-burning oil lamps, speaking in hushed tones about the day's events, or sharing stories passed down through generations. Children might be nursed or comforted during these gentle midnight hours. Couples found this a particularly intimate time for conversation and physical affection, free from the demands and distractions of daylight hours. For those devoted to religious practice, this midnight interval offered precious time for prayer and meditation. The house was still, the outside world silent, and consciousness existed in a liminal state between waking alertness and sleep's spiritual receptivity. Many Egyptians used these hours to recite protective formulas, offer prayers to household gods, or contemplate the sacred mysteries that governed their understanding of existence. Artisans and scribes sometimes used this wakeful period for delicate work that required concentration and steady hands. The soft light of oil lamps created ideal conditions for detailed carving, fine painting, or careful writing. The silence of the night hours meant no interruptions, no household bustle to disturb their focus on intricate tasks. This biphasic sleep pattern was not merely a cultural curiosity, but appears to have been deeply rooted in human physiology. Modern sleep research has discovered that when people are removed from artificial lighting and allowed to sleep according to natural rhythms, they spontaneously develop this pattern of segmented rest. The midnight awakening seems to be encoded in our biological inheritance from ancestors who lived intimately connected to natural light cycles. The ancient Egyptians understood intuitively what modern science is only now rediscovering, that this period of gentle midnight wakefulness served important psychological and spiritual functions. It provided time for the mind to process the day's experiences, to consolidate memories, and to prepare for the dreams and spiritual journeys of the second sleep period. The transition from first to second sleep was often marked by specific rituals. Egyptians might adjust their bedding, reposition protective amulets, or recite brief prayers before settling back into slumber. These actions served both practical and spiritual purposes, ensuring physical comfort while reinforcing the protective barriers that guarded their sleep from malevolent influences. The content and quality of dreams in the second sleep period were often different from those of the first. Egyptians observed that their most vivid and prophetic dreams typically occurred during these later hours, when consciousness had been softened by the preceding sleep and the midnight interval of contemplation. This timing made the second sleep particularly valuable for those seeking divine guidance or prophetic visions. The gradual disappearance of this ancient sleep pattern coincided with the development of more sophisticated artificial lighting. As oil lamps gave way to candles and eventually gas and electric lighting, humans began extending their waking hours later into the night, consolidating their sleep into a single block and losing touch with the natural rhythms that had guided their ancestors for millennia. As the sun god re-began his nightly journey through the underworld, ancient Egyptian households transformed into theaters of sacred ritual. The transition from day to night was not merely a change in lighting conditions, but a profound shift in the spiritual atmosphere that required careful preparation and protective measures. The act of preparing for sleep became an elaborate ceremony designed to ensure safe passage through the dangerous hours of darkness. The process began well before actual bedtime, as family members gathered the necessary implements for their nightly protections. Sacred oils were retrieved from their storage places. Protective amulets were collected and examined for damage. Incense burners were prepared with carefully measured portions of aromatic resins, and the ritual texts were consulted to ensure proper performance of the evening ceremonies. While the feet aimed west toward the realm of the setting sun and death, this alignment ensured that the sleeper's spiritual journey through the night would follow the proper cosmic path. Scarab amulets were positioned on the eastern side, their association with the rising sun making them powerful guardians of rebirth and renewal. Images of the Eye of Horus were placed at strategic points to maintain vigilant watch against malevolent spirits. Jed pillars, symbols of stability and divine protection, were stood upright near the head of the bed to create a spiritual axis connecting the sleeper to celestial powers. The lighting of protective incense marked the formal beginning of the bedtime ritual. Family members would kindle small braziers filled with frankincense, myrrh, and other aromatic substances believed to purify the air and repel evil influences. These sweet-smelling smokes were thought to create a barrier of sanctification around the sleeping area, establishing a zone of divine protection that malevolent spirits could not penetrate. These formulas, passed down through generations and carefully memorized, called upon gods like Base to frighten away demons, Torite to ensure peaceful rest, and Isis to provide maternal protection throughout the vulnerable hours of sleep. The words were spoken with reverent precision, as any error might weaken their protective power, or worse, attract unwanted attention from hostile spiritual forces. The anointing of the body with sacred oils constituted another crucial element of bedtime preparation. These weren't merely cosmetic applications, but ritual acts that transformed the physical form into a sanctified vessel capable of undertaking spiritual journeys. Different oils served specific purposes. Lotus oil promoted prophetic dreams, myrrh protected against possession by evil spirits, and cedar oil ensured the integrity of the soul during its nocturnal wanderings. Children received special attention during these bedtime rituals, as they were considered particularly vulnerable to supernatural threats. Parents would carefully wrap protective amulets in small linen packages and sew them directly into their children's sleeping garments. Tiny scarabs, miniature eyes of Horus, and other potent symbols were thus kept in direct contact with young bodies throughout the night, providing continuous spiritual protection. The placement of protective herbs and plants around the sleeping area represented another layer of mystical defense. Certain vegetation was believed to possess inherent powers against evil influences. Garlic cloves were hung near entrances to repel demons. Lotus petals were scattered around the bed to promote divine dreams, and branches of sacred trees were positioned as barriers against malevolent intrusions. As family members arranged amulets, they spoke words of power that activated the object's protective capabilities. As they lit incense, they recited invocations that purified the air and called benevolent spirits to guard the household. As they anointed bodies with sacred oils, they pronounced formulas that sanctified the flesh and prepared it for spiritual travel. The head was placed carefully on the headrest, while specific words were spoken to activate its protective and resurrection symbolism. The body was positioned according to sacred geometry, with arms and legs arranged in configurations that echoed the positions of divine statues in temples. Protective amulets were clutched in the hands or placed at specific points on the body according to their individual powers and purposes. The final stage of these bedtime rituals involved the recitation of prayers for safe passage through the night. These formulas acknowledged the dangers of the spiritual journey ahead, while expressing confidence in the protective measures that had been put in place. They called upon specific deities to guide the soul through the underworld landscape, to defend against demonic attacks, and to ensure successful return to waking consciousness with the dawn. In the royal libraries of ancient Egypt, among scrolls containing architectural plans, medical treatises, and administrative records, scribes carefully preserved some of humanity's most intriguing documents, comprehensive guides to understanding the mysterious language of dreams. These papyri, written in precise hieroglyphic script, represented centuries of accumulated wisdom about the symbolic communications that flowed from the divine realm into mortal consciousness during sleep. The most remarkable of these ancient dream interpretation manuals, the Chester Beatty Papyrus III, opens with the matter-of-fact statement, "If a man sees himself in a dream, ... What follows is a systematic catalog of dream scenarios and their meanings, organized with the methodical precision that characterized Egyptian scholarship. Each entry follows a consistent formula: description of the dream image, classification as either beneficial or ominous, and explanation of its prophetic significance. The Egyptians recognized that dreams spoke in metaphors rather than literal statements, requiring skilled analysis to decode their true meanings. They understood that the same image might carry different significance depending on the dreamer's circumstances, social position, and current life situation. Religious dreams held particular importance in this interpretive system. Visions of gods were considered direct communications requiring immediate attention and careful analysis. A dream featuring the god Thoth might indicate upcoming legal proceedings or the need to pursue scholarly study. Appearances by the goddess Isis suggested matters related to magic, healing, or feminine power. The god Ta's presence in dreams, often connected to craftsmanship, construction projects, or artistic endeavors. Animal symbolism formed another crucial category in Egyptian dream interpretation. The appearance of specific creatures carried precise prophetic meanings rooted in their symbolic associations within Egyptian religious thought. Dreams of cats, sacred to the goddess Bastet, might indicate protection and good fortune. Visions of ibises, birds associated with Thoth, suggested matters of wisdom and learning. Crocodiles, linked to the god Sobek, could warn of hidden dangers or promise powerful protection. Color played a significant role in dream analysis, with different hues carrying specific symbolic meanings. Gold in dreams connected to divine favor and material prosperity. Blue suggested protection and connection to celestial powers. Red could indicate either vitality and strength or danger and conflict, depending on context. White often signified purity and spiritual advancement, while black might warn of death or transformation. The interpretation of prophetic dreams required extensive training and specialized knowledge. Professional dream interpreters, often attached to temples or royal courts, underwent years of study to master the complex symbolic systems involved. They memorized vast catalogs of dream symbols, studied the relationships between different images, and learned to synthesize multiple elements into coherent prophetic statements. These specialists understood that dream interpretation was not a mechanical process of looking up symbols in reference books, but required intuitive insight and spiritual sensitivity. They served as intermediaries between the human and divine realms, translating the cryptic messages of the gods into practical guidance for mortal lives. The economic and social implications of dreams were taken seriously throughout Egyptian society. A prophetic dream warning of poor harvests might prompt a pharaoh to increase grain reserves or modify agricultural policies. Visions suggesting military threats could trigger defensive preparations or diplomatic initiatives. Personal dreams about family matters, business prospects, or health concerns influenced individual decisions with far-reaching consequences. The practice of dream incubation, deliberately seeking prophetic dreams, became highly developed in Egyptian temple culture. Specialized chambers within sacred precincts were designed specifically for this purpose, creating environments where the boundary between waking and dreaming consciousness became permeable. These temple sleeping chambers featured elaborate decorations depicting beneficial deities, protective symbols, and scenes of divine blessing designed to encourage positive spiritual encounters. Petitioners seeking divine guidance through dreams underwent extensive preparation before entering these sacred spaces. They purified themselves through ritual bathing, fasted for prescribed periods, made appropriate offerings to temple gods, and recited specific prayers designed to attract benevolent spiritual attention. The entire process was supervised by trained priests who understood the subtle arts of facilitating divine communication through sleep. The therapeutic applications of dream interpretation represented another sophisticated aspect of Egyptian sleep science. Medical papyri describe how physicians used dream analysis as a diagnostic tool, understanding that the symbolic imagery of sleep could reveal hidden illnesses or suggest appropriate treatments. Patients were encouraged to report their dreams to healers, who analyzed these nocturnal visions for clues about the spiritual and physical causes of disease. Healing dreams often featured specific deities known for their medical expertise. The deified architect Imhotep, who had been elevated to divine status partly because of his legendary medical knowledge, frequently appeared in therapeutic dreams to prescribe remedies or perform miraculous cures. The goddess Sekhmet, despite her fearsome reputation, was also invoked for healing dreams, as her power over disease made her capable of both causing and curing illness. The physical spaces where ancient Egyptians slept were far more than mere bedrooms. They were carefully designed sacred environments that facilitated the spiritual journeys undertaken during sleep. From the grandest palace chambers to the humblest peasant dwellings, Egyptian sleeping spaces incorporated architectural elements and decorative programs specifically intended to protect, guide, and bless the vulnerable souls of sleepers. The orientation of sleeping chambers followed cosmic principles that connected earthly rest to celestial movements. Windows and openings were positioned to capture specific astronomical alignments, allowing starlight from particular constellations to fall upon sleeping forms at crucial moments during the night. The constellation of Orion, identified with the god Osiris, was especially important. Its light was believed to convey the protective presence of the Lord of the Afterlife to mortal sleepers. Wall decorations in Egyptian bedrooms were never merely aesthetic choices, but served specific magical and spiritual functions. Painted friezes depicted protective deities standing guard, their images activated through consecration rituals to serve as vigilant guardians throughout the night. The Eye of Horus appeared repeatedly in these decorative schemes, its watchful gaze maintaining constant surveillance against malevolent intrusions. The color schemes employed in bedroom decoration followed precise symbolic codes understood throughout Egyptian society. Deep blue, the color of the night sky and celestial protection, dominated ceiling paintings that transformed bedroom ceilings into star maps of the heavens. Gold accents highlighted the most important protective symbols, their gleaming surfaces catching and reflecting whatever light was available to maintain spiritual vigilance, even in darkness. Ceiling decorations were particularly elaborate in high-status sleeping chambers, often featuring complete astronomical charts that mapped the nightly journey of celestial bodies across the heavens. These stellar calendars served both practical and spiritual purposes, helping occupants track religious festivals, while providing a comforting sense of connection to cosmic order during the vulnerable hours of sleep. The placement of furniture within sleeping chambers followed strict guidelines derived from temple architecture, just as sacred spaces were organized according to spiritual principles. Bedroom arrangements created domestic sanctuaries that channeled divine protection toward sleeping occupants. Storage chests containing personal belongings were positioned to form protective barriers, while ceremonial objects were displayed in locations that maximized their spiritual influence. Ventilation systems in Egyptian bedrooms revealed sophisticated understanding of both comfort and spiritual requirements. Carefully designed air shafts not only provided cooling breezes during hot nights, but were oriented to channel specific cosmic energies into sleeping spaces. These ventilation channels sometimes incorporated small chambers where incense could be burned, perfuming the air with protective fragrances while purifying the spiritual atmosphere. The integration of water features into bedroom design served both practical and mystical purposes. Small basins filled with sacred water from the Nile were positioned near sleeping areas to provide humidity during dry seasons, while maintaining symbolic connection to Egypt's life-giving river. These water features also served as focal points for purification rituals performed before sleep, allowing occupants to cleanse themselves spiritually as well as physically. Storage systems for protective amulets and ritual implements were built into bedroom furniture and architecture. Special compartments in bed frames held collections of scarabs, protective texts written on papyrus, and other magical implements needed for nightly protection rituals. These storage systems kept sacred objects secure while ensuring easy access during bedtime preparations. The acoustic properties of Egyptian sleeping chambers were carefully considered to facilitate the spiritual aspects of sleep. Room proportions and wall materials were selected to enhance the resonance of spoken prayers and incantations, ensuring that protective formulas would be heard clearly by the divine beings. They were intended to summon sound-dampening features, protected sleepers from external disturbances, while amplifying the subtle spiritual communications believed to occur during dreams. As dawn breaks over the modern world and we emerge from our comfortable beds, having explored the intricate and mystical sleep practices of ancient Egypt, we find ourselves confronting questions that our ancestors pondered for millennia. What is the true nature of sleep? Is it merely a biological necessity, a period of unconscious restoration, or something far more profound, a nightly journey into realms of experience that our waking minds can barely comprehend? The ancient Egyptians, with their elaborate headrests and protective rituals, their dream interpretation manuals and sacred sleeping chambers, understood sleep as a fundamental bridge between worlds. Every night, they believed, human consciousness embarked upon adventures that connected mortal existence to divine reality, temporal life to eternal truth. Their bizarre habits, viewed through this lens, reveal themselves not as primitive superstitions, but as sophisticated technologies of the spirit. Consider the profound wisdom embedded in their practice of biphasic sleep, the natural division of night rest into two periods separated by gentle wakefulness. Modern sleep research has vindicated this ancient pattern, discovering that it aligns with our deepest biological rhythms and may actually promote better mental health and creativity than our current practice of consolidated sleep. The midnight hours that Egyptians devoted to quiet contemplation and spiritual practice may have provided psychological benefits that we have lost in our rush toward efficient, uninterrupted slumber. Their recognition of sleep as a vulnerable state requiring spiritual protection speaks to intuitions about consciousness that we are only beginning to rediscover. Contemporary neuroscience reveals that during sleep, our brains undergo dramatic changes in activity patterns, processing memories, consolidating learning, and apparently accessing states of consciousness radically different from waking experience. The Egyptian understanding that sleeping minds were particularly receptive to influences from non-ordinary reality may not be as fantastical as once assumed. The elaborate preparation rituals surrounding Egyptian bedtime, the arrangement of protective amulets, the recitation of safeguarding formulas, the careful orientation of sleeping spaces, created what we might now recognize as powerfully supportive environments for psychological well-being. These practices fostered a sense of security and spiritual connection that likely promoted better sleep quality and more meaningful dream experiences than our often anxious and disconnected modern approach to nighttime rest. Their sophisticated dream interpretation systems, preserved in ancient papyri, demonstrate a level of psychological insight that anticipates many discoveries of modern depth psychology. The Egyptian recognition that dreams speak in symbols, requiring skilled interpretation, that nocturnal visions can provide guidance for waking life, and that the imagery of sleep reveals hidden aspects of the psyche, parallels conclusions reached by contemporary dream researchers and therapists. Perhaps most intriguingly, their view of sleep as spiritual journey challenges our materialist assumptions about consciousness itself. While we tend to regard waking rational thought as the gold standard of mental functioning, the Egyptians recognized that sleep consciousness provided access to forms of knowledge and experience unavailable to ordinary awareness. Their practices were designed to cultivate and explore these altered states, treating them as valuable sources of insight rather than meaningless neural noise. The physical discomfort of stone headrests, which initially strikes us as incomprehensible, reveals itself as part of a larger philosophy that valued spiritual development over mere physical comfort. By accepting certain material hardships, Egyptian sleepers may have cultivated forms of discipline and awareness that enhanced their capacity for meaningful dream experience and spiritual growth. Their integration of sleep practices with religious and magical worldviews created a holistic approach to nighttime rest that addressed psychological, spiritual, and social needs simultaneously. Sleep was not an isolated biological function, but an integral part of a comprehensive way of life that sought harmony between human existence and cosmic order. As we face epidemics of sleep disorders, anxiety-related insomnia, and dream-impoverished rest in our modern world, the ancient Egyptian approach to sleep offers provocative alternatives to our current practices. While we need not adopt their specific rituals or beliefs, we might benefit from their recognition that sleep deserves careful attention, respectful preparation, and spiritual consideration. Their understanding that nighttime rest connects us to larger patterns of meaning, cosmic cycles, divine purposes, eternal truths, provides a profound contrast to our tendency to treat sleep as merely functional downtime. By approaching sleep as sacred activity, deserving of ritualistic preparation and protective care, they created conditions for rest that nourished not just physical bodies, but psychological and spiritual well-being. The lesson embedded in their bizarre habits may be that sleep is far too important to be left to chance, too mysterious to be reduced to mere biology, and too powerful to be approached without reverence and preparation. In their stone pillows and midnight rituals, their protective amulets and prophetic dreams, the ancient Egyptians preserved wisdom about the depths of consciousness that our scientific age is only beginning to rediscover. As you prepare for sleep tonight, perhaps you might pause to consider what the ancient Egyptians knew, that in closing your eyes and surrendering to unconsciousness, you are embarking upon a journey as profound and mysterious as any voyage to distant lands. The dreams that await you, the restoration that sleep provides, and the consciousness that emerges with dawn's light all participate in mysteries that have fascinated humanity for millennia. Whether you rest your head on the softest pillow or the hardest stone, you join an ancient fellowship of dreamers who understood that sleep, in all its strangeness and beauty, remains one of life's most precious and enigmatic gifts. The ancient Egyptians knew this truth and built an entire civilization that honored the sacred mystery of sleep. Perhaps it is time for us to remember what they never forgot, that every night we die a little death, and every morning we are reborn. Their legacy whispers to us across the millennia. Sleep well, dream deeply, and remember that in the land of dreams, we are all citizens of eternity, travelers in realms where time has no meaning and the impossible becomes inevitable. The bizarre habits of the ancient Egyptians were not so bizarre after all. They were the practices of a people who understood that sleep is the gateway to the infinite, and that every dreamer is an explorer of the divine. In the end, their stone pillows supported not just royal heads, but royal dreams, visions that connected earthly pharaohs to cosmic truths. And in their wisdom, every sleeper was a pharaoh, every dream a royal vision, every awakening a resurrection. This, perhaps, is the most profound lesson from the land of eternal sleep. that in honoring our nightly journey into unconsciousness, we honor the deepest mysteries of human existence itself. Sweet dreams, fellow travelers. May your rest be as deep as the Nile, your dreams as eternal as the pyramids, and your awakening as glorious as the rising sun over ancient Egypt.